From Illinois Public Media in Urbana, this is a candidate forum for the 13th Congressional District. Today, candidates seeking the Republican Party nomination. Our program is being produced in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Champaign County and the NAACP of Champaign County. I'm Brian Mackey, host of the 21st Show, a statewide talk show heard on 5 NPR stations across Illinois. The 13th Congressional District is a thin slice of central Illinois. It starts out in the Metro East, the area of Illinois across the Mississippi River from St. Louis. It heads north through Springfield, then turns east, cuts through Decatur, and ends up in Champaign-Urbana. It was gerrymandered to elect a Democrat, and it has been successful in doing so for the past 2 election cycles. The two-term incumbent is Nikki Budzinski. She's facing a challenge in the Democratic primary from Dylan Blaha, but our forum today is on the Republican side. Joshua Lloyd is back after running against Budzinski in the last election. He was defeated 58-42. He's an Army veteran who has graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, though a medical condition discovered late in his time there meant he was not commissioned as an officer. The other candidate is Jeff Wilson, a member of the Champaign County Board. He's also a veteran, having served as a nuclear power officer in the United States Navy. Before we have our candidates introduce themselves, a few ground rules on today's conversation. Candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening remarks, up to 2 minutes to answer each question, and 2 minutes for closing remarks. Each candidate will also have 2 opportunities for a rebuttal where they can take up to 30 seconds to respond to what their opponent says. And that will be that. Candidates are not meant to respond to a rebuttal. I want to say this is a candidate forum, not a debate. The idea here is to have a structured conversation. I hope we can learn not just what policy positions each candidate supports, but also how they think about some of the most important issues facing Central Illinoisans today. Given that, if I feel the need to press for an answer or for clarification, I will do so. So, Mr. Lloyd, being graced with the first position in our alphabet, you get to go first. You have 2 minutes for your introduction.
Thank you, Ryan. Once again, my name is Joshua Lloyd, spelled a little bit different than the usual. It's L-O-Y-D with 1 L. I'm running to be a Republican candidate for the Illinois 13th Congressional District. And the top policies that I am going to focus on are the economy, energy, and education. Our economy, we need to reduce the tax burden on everyday Illinoisans. With 80% of Illinois or the 13th Congressional being urban and roughly 20% being rural, a lot of individuals are paying into their city or their municipalities, and they're not receiving the same benefits back that they are taxed at. Additionally, energy is a driving factor here in Illinois. We are one of the top producers of energy in the entire nation, but we are still importing energy from Canada. So with that, why are we importing energy when we are a top producer? We need to reduce the tax burden. We need to reduce the energy burden that we are consuming. We need to reduce the tax burden for energy. And then finally, we need to fix the educational system. Only 1 in 4 students are able to read, write, or comprehend math at grade level. With that said, we are one of the top spenders on education at roughly $18,000 per student, but we are not getting the bang for our buck that we deserve. Our students are not getting the successful resources in the education system like we promised them.
All right, Mr. Wilson, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Illinois Public Radio, League of Women Voters, NAACP of Champaign, for organizing this Republican Candidate Forum. Thank you so much for your service to the community. It is very impactful and meaningful. My name is Jeff Wilson. I'm running for U.S. Congress to represent you here in Central Illinois in District Number 13 in Washington, D.C. Your voice deserves to be heard in Washington, D.C. For far too long, your voice has been ignored and not listened to, and I pledge to fix that. I'm a constitutional conservative. I support limited federal government, states' rights, and individual freedom. Regarding my qualifications and myself, my history includes a background in U.S. Navy nuclear service, enlisted and commissioned officer in the reserves. I hold a master's degree in nuclear engineering from this fantastic university. I've been in leadership in nuclear industry, and I have twice been elected to serve you on the Champaign County Board. On a personal note, I am married. I have 8 children and 11 grandchildren. I have the qualifications required to take your voice and work for you day one in Washington, D.C. I am deeply concerned about border security, crime, and corruption, and I want to see Illinois be prosperous and successful. I've traveled up and down this 175-mile-long snake gerrymandered district. I constantly hear about the desire and fears economic distress that is in our county and most families face due to disconnected Democratic policies and failed leadership. Families are deeply concerned about illegals, associated crime. Many are fleeing Illinois, about 8,000 a year. Families want safety, security, and prosperity. I promise to work for you on day one as your representative. Take your voice there and stand up for your values. My name is Jeff Wilson. I'm running to be your representative in Congress, District 13. I'm asking for your support and your vote. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to start on domestic policy and the economy, which is something that voters say is an issue that is most important to them still. Let's begin with tariffs. What do you think of the way President Trump has made use of tariffs? And Joshua Lloyd, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, so on tariffs, President Trump has implemented more or less a equal tariff on nations that are imposing a tariff on the United States. And why that is occurring, many of these nations were implementing these high tariffs to receive extra tax from the U.S. taxpayer on the goods that are shipped to their nation. But we are not receiving that money back when they ship their goods to us. For example, Canada was implementing a very heavy tax on agriculture coming from the United States, and they were profiting pretty tremendously. And Trump came in and said, this will no longer be the case. You will no longer take advantage of our farmers. And he put a tariff back on Canada to receive that money back. So they are not able to continue more or less ripping us off. With that said, it's also a bargaining chip to get these nations to the table to negotiate on better trade deals, better financial incentives to trade with nations, and for those nations to trade with the United States, as well as to help policy in nations and help align their policy with U.S. strategic interests. So in terms of Trump's tariffs, I completely support them. I think he's doing a wonderful job. It's brought a lot of nations to the negotiating tables, and I'm excited to see where we will be in another year.
Mr. Wilson.
Same question. I absolutely support President Trump's application of the tariff policy. And the United States has always used tariffs for our benefit because the United States of America should be first in the world. Beginning with our first president all the way to our current president, tariffs have been used. They're used basically for 3 things. 1, to increase the income of the United States. And number 2, to protect industry and workers, manufacturing, farmers in the nation, and also used as a negotiating tool that redounds to the benefit of the United States economy, the United States workers. So I agree with what President Trump has started, what he is accomplishing, and what he will accomplish.
Tariffs come at a steep price, and I'm going to direct this, we can rotate who goes first here. They come at a steep price, especially for Illinois farmers, many of whom are in the 13th District. What does that tell you about tariffs as a policy, and what should Congress do about that?
Well, thank you. Yes, so District 13, as configured as it is about 79% rural, 21% rural, 79% urban. And it does come at a price initially. But what I see the tariffs accomplishing is opening broader and wider and more innovative markets for the farmers. And as you know, the big, beautiful bill and other executive orders have put in a stronger safety net for farmers. And when I talk with farmers across the district, they're appreciative of the farm safety net, but they really want to be left alone to farm. Farmers should farm. I believe that it's going to redound to a strong economy for our farmers and for all manufacturers and all industries and the economy here in Illinois.
Mr. Lloyd.
In regards to tariffs on farms, with Illinois positioned where we are, we have access to several advantages versus other states. We have the Mississippi and we have the Ohio. The ability to transport various agricultural products by the river to the south throughout the world. And I know many farmers who they utilize the rivers in order to sell to China or to sell to Japan or to sell to Ukraine, for example. With that said, we have to give our farmers the ability and the access to enter these markets without the burden of them having to pay the extensive costs on these tariffs. With that said, farms are able to receive certain types of benefits for their farm, depending on the size of it and what product they produce. So I would really like to see some of the more influential products or more influential policies being implemented help our farmers when we are using them for strategic advantages. So with the tariff on Canada, for example, we weren't able to ship as much agricultural products to Canada because no one in Canada wanted to buy the products at a heavier price. So with that, we have to ensure that we are helping them at the same time. We are giving them the subsidies to offset that policy decision by either the president or by our Congress in order to implement these policies or these negotiations.
Move on to another domestic policy that is related to the economy still, and that is healthcare. Costs have been rising, as they have in so many areas of our economy, but even faster in healthcare. Republicans have been trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act for years, since it was passed, really. The party has not been able to agree on an alternative. What do you think, Joshua Lloyd, what do you think is the path forward on healthcare policy?
So if we look at healthcare in the nation, the Affordable Care Act, it allowed some individuals to get their insurance. But ultimately what it did is it created artificial inflation within the market. You have supply and demand. When the demand is increasing, but you can regulate how much supply there is, you're able to raise those costs. And that's what we saw in the healthcare industry. When the Affordable Care Act was implemented, from that time, and I believe it was either 08, 09, the CEOs at these companies, or the stock price, increased over 1,200% in some of these companies. In some of these companies, we can't allow that because, more or less, if you consider it in a fraud perspective, they are increasing the share price of their stock by regulating how much supply is in the market. And that makes it more expensive for you and me to buy healthcare. It makes it more expensive for individuals to get quality healthcare at a good price. So really we need to go back to a market-based system. We need market-based reform. And what that looks like is allowing the free market, the invisible hand of the free market, to regulate how much premiums, how much health insurance actually costs. That'll actually bring down the cost of healthcare across the board. But we still need that safety net for some individuals. So what that looks like, it'll look like a lot of negotiation between the Republicans and the Democrats in order to provide the safety nets, but also bring down the cost of healthcare.
Jeff Wilson.
Thank you. We all want to be healthy. We all want the price for that health to be reasonable. And I agree that healthcare cost, and I've experienced myself, as everyone that's listening here, about the high price of cost and the insurance associated with it, or the high cost. So there's two parts here. You have the executive side, and then you have the legislative side. The executive, through the Make America Healthy Again program, seems to be working quite a bit. And the negotiations for most favored price for drugs seems to be dropping prices on drugs. On the legislative side, we all have to just work together, negotiate on what's reasonable, affordable, and effective for everybody in the United States, but particularly here in District Number 13. Telehealth, all kinds of different things can be used to manage cost, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of negotiation, and that's what I would recommend. I will be there to negotiate for you so that you can stay healthy, remain healthy at an affordable price, and be there rolling up my sleeves in Congress for negotiation for the right path forward for health care.
This next question comes from a member of the League of Women Voters of Champaign County. They say, our region is experiencing historically high housing costs for both home buyers and renters. What pro-housing policies would you support to ensure everyone has a safe place to live? Continuing our rotation, Jeff Wilson.
Everyone deserves and should have a safe place to live that's affordable. Right here in Champaign County, even in the city of Champaign, there's a 97% occupancy, 3% vacancy. There is basically no place to go. And interest rates right now, the higher interest rates don't incentivize changes or moving up to allow more space. At the congressional level, what we can do is the following. We can work with housing and urban development, gather together both state, local, and federal teams collaborating on expanding housing affordability and housing location. As you know, most housing is governed by county regulation, not federal regulation. So I propose working as a team with state and local to figure out a way to make housing more affordable. And there's incredible great technologies. One great technology is 3D printing a house. Right now, 3D printing is available for building houses. I would like to see that technology develop to make it more quicker, affordable, and efficient for people. And houses need to be located where people work.
Joshua Lloyd, what pro-housing policies would you support to ensure everyone has a safe place to live?
Real estate is one of those fascinating industries in the United States, not because it's necessarily the most fascinating in terms of in a science perspective, but with all the tax regulations and all the policies revolving around it, anyone who is in real estate usually is doing pretty well for themselves. Anyone who is in the upper 1%, they utilize real estate in part of their portfolio. But with that, it also increases the price of housing. So one of the things that these hedge funds were doing was utilizing property as a way to hedge against the market. And they weren't putting any renter in the houses. They were just keeping the house for the ability to retain its value or increase in value over time. But with that, a lot of individuals are not receiving the housing that they deserve, partly because of mental health. There are a lot of individuals in the 13th Congressional District who are mentally ill and do not have a house because of it. So I would really like to see some form of mental health programs for these individuals to get them off the streets and into programs with a clean bed, with a roof over their head, a hot meal in front of them, and being able to receive the health care and mental health resources that they deserve, that we should be providing them.
All right, another area of domestic policy that has been much discussed this year is immigration and the way those laws are being enforced at the moment. So, Josh Lloyd, I'll start with you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the job that immigration enforcement and Border Patrol are doing in places like Minneapolis and Chicagoland?
Part of the issue today is all the conflicting media on immigration. A lot of the media is trying to inflame the situation. They're trying to either frame the perspective of immigration as evil or as kidnapping people off the street. And regardless of what you believe, if ICE is good or bad, what the ultimate goal is to not have unchecked immigration within the United States. We are trying to have some type of reform in order to allow the individuals who want to come to the United States legally have a process that is not as complex as it is currently. Some individuals are going through 10, 15, sometimes 20 years just to get their citizenship for the United States. But with that, immigrants do provide a net positive within the United States. You know, you look at Chicago, for example. Roughly 25% of the jobs in Chicago are of immigrants, or the individuals are immigrant-born. But also on top of that, a lot of the concern comes down to where the benefits come from. You know, if you have something like Social Security, if they're a net drain, net positive, or if they're feeding into the system. And voter ID, a lot of the conflict comes down to our immigrants who are not able to vote in U.S. elections voting. And the data is all over the place on it. Some people say that it is more than it is. Others are saying it's not even a thing. So I would really like to see more statistical data on if they are actually voting in U.S. elections and where and how so.
Jeff Wilson, 1 to 10, how is immigration enforcement? How do you think it's going, Minneapolis, Chicagoland, elsewhere?
I'm going to say it depends. And the reason I'm going to say that is across the United States, like in Florida or Texas, states administered by Republicans, I would give it a 10. When we come to Minneapolis, rating the effectiveness of removing illegals from the United States, I would say it's about 80 to 90%, and the reason is not because of immigration and enforcing federal law, it's because of the extreme resistance and hindering and hampering and hamstringing law enforcement from carrying out their law. Everybody knows law enforcement is more effective when we allow the law enforcement, in accordance with the law, to enforce the law. That effectiveness is not as well as it should be, not because of the agency itself, but because of the individuals that are violating the law and not allowing law enforcement to implement the law as written.
Should agents be wearing masks and not identifying themselves, not having name tags on? What do you think about that? This is a current, as we are recording this conversation, this is something being hotly debated in the Congress at the moment. What do you think? Masks, no name tags, or change that?
Very emotional. And I know a DHS funding is held up in Congress right now related to that. I could see the advantage of cameras. However, those law enforcement professionals that are serving our country to enforce the law, you know and I know, if they have name badges without masks, then their livelihood, their families, their children, all their friends will be attacked. So because it's so egregious attack on our law enforcement, they deserve to be protected and their families protected. I know it's scary to have someone wear a mask, but also that individual that's enforcing the law has a family. They have children, and they deserve to be protected. If we lived in a perfect society, yeah, don't wear a mask. But we live in an imperfect society, and there are a lot of people that want to destroy those ICE agents and their families. So I want them to be protected. So for me, it's okay for them to wear a mask because it protects them and their families. The key thing is just obey the law. Just support the ICE agents, and then it will all go well.
Joshua Lloyd, what do you think about the masks and the lack of identification on these agents?
Well, we've seen a series of agents being doxxed by organizations such as Antifa. So it really comes down to the safety of the officer, of their family. Some of the officers were being threatened at their home. Their wife was being threatened. Their kids were being threatened at school. So it's a matter of safety for these officers. They are officers for the United States. They are implementing the laws that we have on the books. It is not their position to, judge the individuals. It is just to enforce the law. But when you are causing fear to the officers who are carrying out the policy, then that becomes an issue. So the masks are a preventative measure to prevent the officers from their duty being deteriorated by organizations such as Antifa, who are actively combating our ICE officers.
I do want to, before we go on, I do want to mention there was a comment earlier about non-citizens voting and facts. One story that came to my attention, just for listeners can make of this what they will. Georgia did do an audit of the 2020 election. Out of 8.2 million voters, they found 20 non-citizens who were registered to vote. So I'm not going to try and do the percentage math on that, but it's pretty small out of 8.2 million for what that's worth. Sticking with this immigration topic, after federal agents shot and killed Alex Preddy, who was an intensive care nurse with the Veterans Administration, President Trump, in response to a question, said, quote, "You can't have guns, you can't walk in with guns," end quote. Preddy was a lawful gun owner. Gun rights groups have been outraged at some of the administration's response to this. Joshua Lloyd, what do you think about that?
I am a very strong advocate for our Second Amendment. A lot of the rules and policy on the books right now, I believe, are infringements against our Second Amendment. But with that said, in terms of the Alex Preddy situation, watching the video, it is very conflicting on the actual perspective on, was he doing the right thing? Was he actively antagonizing ICE officers while knowingly carrying a firearm? Carrying a firearm is a big responsibility. It's nothing to take lightly. So if you're going to be out in public with a firearm, you got to carry it responsibly. You got to know the places you can enter. You got to know the situations you can be in, and you got to know when not to intervene in some situations. The situation, I can't say whether the ICE officer or Alex Preddy were justified in anything, but it is very unfortunate, and I don't believe Alex Preddy should have been shot for carrying a firearm. I don't believe anyone should be shot for just carrying a firearm. Watching the video, it did seem like the 6-hour firearm did negligently discharged, and it caused confusion for other officers perceiving a threat of life, and that is ultimately why they shot. You can always do the freeze frame and justify actions. You can always do freeze frames and argue against something, but in those tense situations, it is a quick reaction. You can't make a decision over a course of 10, 20 minutes. It has to be instantaneously. So it's really unfortunate, and I don't think he should have been shot, but I will always stand by Second Amendment rights.
Jeff Wilson, what do you think? The president says you can't have guns, you can't walk in with guns. A lot of gun rights groups are thinking that's not the right way to go. Where do you come down on that?
Thanks, Brian. I fully support our Second Amendment and First Amendment. In fact, all the amendments, especially the first 10, the Bill of Rights. Every individual has the right to speak freely. Every individual has the right to be heard. Every individual has the right to protest. And where the laws, state laws allow it, for concealed carry or open carry, every individual has the right to do that. It's unfortunate. It's a tragedy. I'm deeply heartbroken that someone was killed. I do not want to see that happen again. Nevertheless, we all need to realize we should not obstruct law enforcement from carrying out their lawful duties. I do not know the ins and outs of the case or the precursors that got there, or all the emotions and feelings that people felt at that time. I believe over time due process will be exercised according to our constitutional values, and then we can make an informed decision. But I'm not going to be a Monday morning quarterback over this. I just agree it's tragic. I agree it's unfortunate. We have a right to protest, and we have a right to carry. We're allowed to carry. And I support the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, just like the rest of Americans do, and the right to free speech, and the right for law enforcement to carry out their lawful duties.
Another domestic policy issue that has been front of mind in recent years is that of abortion. Jeff Wilson, back to you. Would you support a national law prohibiting abortion, including mailing abortion medicine across state lines, such as mifepristone?
I support the law as written. As you know, there's the Comstock Act, 1800s Comstock Act, that prohibits the mailing across state boundaries or using the mail system to support those kind of drugs. That's the law of the land. I support it. There's also a law of the land that says it's up to the states to decide about a woman's choice. I support the law of the land. At the same time, I support life. I believe life begins at conception, accordance with the biological process, and life is precious, how it begins, how it's treated, how it's nurtured, all the way from conception to birth, to raising up, to growing up, to old age. Life is precious. I believe it should be protected.
Just to follow up, if a bill were to come before you, yes or no, a national ban on abortion, how would you vote on that?
I would support protection of human life. I have not seen that bill, but I support protection of human life. At the same time, I protect free choice. It's kind of a conundrum, right? It's kind of there's pluses and minuses, but yes, I support life 100%.
Joshua Lloyd, national ban on abortion, including through the mail.
So let's get some of the data in the mix, right? So when we talk about abortion, a lot of the individuals are talking about women health care. But what does that actually represent? So 96% of abortion is elective. What does that mean? That means 96% of all abortions are because the mother just does not want the child. The other 4%, that is everything from rape, incest, to medical conditions such as ectopic pregnancies. And those, I believe, there should be an exception within limits for the procedure. But 96%, just because a mother doesn't want a child, to me, I believe abortion to be murder. I will always protect life. What does it mean when the child is born into a situation that is not ideal? We have to follow up with the mothers and ensure that they are able to grow up in a healthy lifestyle. You know, the child needs to be able to have clothes, have shoes, have a warm meal, a roof over the head. It's not just saying that we have to have the child born and then give up on them. We have to follow through on protecting life, all the way from the birth further on.
And would you support a national ban if it were to come before you as a member of Congress?
So I've talked with congressmen. There will not be another bill on abortion. I've talked with several Republican congressmen on this exact topic. There is no plan to put any abortion bill on the table within the next 5 to 10 years.
I feel like you're not answering the question, though. If it were, yes or no?
With the exception of rape and life of the mother, I would support a ban.
Okay. Let's move on to some foreign policy topics. Of course, as a member of Congress, you're very focused on your district, but you would be called on to vote on matters of international concern, which of course can rebound to us back here in the district. So I think I'm on Joshua Lloyd for this one to start. Should America seek to conquer or otherwise acquire Greenland from Denmark?
I find this to be a pretty funny situation, right? So if you've read any of Donald Trump's books, or if you've seen the tactics that he utilizes, he will always go to the most extreme situation just in order to get nations or leaders to a negotiating table. His ultimate plan might not be to actually acquire Greenland, but to have some deal in place with Greenland to put our military. The ultimate position would be to have the dome. I'm forgetting the term for it, but essentially
Golden Dome.
Golden Dome. There we go. Thank you. Which is a protective system for the United States. It's strategic. It's defensive. It helps the United States. We have the ability to do it now, but it sounds like Trump has more information in front of him than we do, and he would like to have a better control on, especially the region near Greenland, as the ice caps melt. So if you ever watch or read Russian media, they talk about cold ports and warm ports, which is essentially just meaning, frozen ports where all the ice is hard to break through the ice, and warm ports. So anything from Florida to Maine, where the water is just normal. We just call them ports. Russia has to distinguish between the two.
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah, should America seek to conquer or otherwise obtain Greenland from Denmark?
Thank you. Conquer, no. Acquire, in some form or fashion, according to the current negotiation, I agree with that.
Greenland or Denmark says it's not for sale. So
that's true. They said that. And you and I both know, as everyone that's listening, that there are negotiations going on. I don't know how the negotiations will pan out. The United States has wanted to acquire Greenland for over 100 years. Our primary interest in Greenland began with World War II, when the Germans took over Norway, took over Europe. And we protected Greenland from it being taken over by Germany during World War II. So Greenland is essential both to our national security and the international security, really, of NATO, the national security of all the NATO-aligned nations. Open sea lanes up and across and around Greenland that governs our trade is essential. Takeover? No. Acquire, partially or completely, in some form or fashion, that redounds to two things: our national security and the security of NATO, and free flow of goods through trade. That should be the reason.
This gets at an issue of what America's role should be in the world in the future, right? And we could talk about a free Ukraine. We could talk about the capture of Venezuela's president. We could talk about America's support for Israel and bombing Iran. I have questions on all that, but for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap that together and say, connecting thread, I think, in the Trump foreign policy is that he's seeking to make the U.S. a regional power, pulling back from the idea that we were a global power, which we have been since World War II. This is part of America First. It's part of what MAGA wants. What do you think? Should the U.S. seek to remain a global superpower?
The question is, should U.S. seek to
remain, should we continue to be a global superpower,
Yeah.
or America First? We just need to mind our business at home, maybe do some stuff in Latin America from time to time.
Intriguing question. And I love international relationships. Number one, two things can be true at once. One, the United States can be first, preeminent, and the most powerful country on the world and should be that way and remain that way. The second part is, without the United States, imagine what the world would be like today. Imagine about Russia takeover, Chinese takeover, North Korean takeover. There's no Taiwan. There's no Australia. It's all gone because of the United States. So two things can be true at once. Yes, America first, and our international policy has to redound to the fact that America remains first. But without us, there would be no trade across the world. Our U.S. Navy, maintains the seas lanes open all the way from China to Greenland to Australia, all over the world. And without us, the world would be a mess because it's reality. We're all not just good friends. We're all not just kind people. It's all the real politique, right? So the United States needs to do both. And I believe Trump is doing that. Number one, he's keeping our interests first and preeminent, at the same time keeping the world safe from falling apart.
Joshua Lloyd, should the United States seek to remain a global superpower or mind our business more at home and in our region,
And
as the president seems to want?
Well, that's always been a conflict for the United States. You know, you look at World War I, World War II, there was the isolationists, there were the globalists, there's interventionists. So really what it comes down to is, will a certain action benefit the world? Most people don't know this, but the United States, primarily our military, is the biggest humanitarian organization in the entire world. They've provided more medicine, more food than any organization, any other nation in the entire world in history. With that, a lot of nations still rely on the United States for these resources. But with that, we also have to focus on our interests, what we need at the moment. We don't want to be a bad guy. You have countries like China utilizing debt trapping, where they give these loans at extensive interest rates, impossible to pay back, and then in return, the nation of China receives that asset from the nation, whether it be a port or a mine or other resource. The United States doesn't do that. We do things because it benefits the world. It benefits humanity. It's good for the world as a whole. But we also need to focus on ourselves. We have all the resources domestically. We just have to utilize it efficiently and respectfully.
I want to talk about American democracy and working together in Congress, or fighting the other side in Congress, as happens so much these days. Let's set a ground level here, though, about Joshua Lloyd. I know we've talked about this in the past, but this is a question I've asked just about every Republican I've spoken to in the last few years. Who won the election in 2020, and was it a free and fair election?
So the more data coming out, Georgia just audited the election from 2020, and some sources are showing that the votes were inflated, across the board.
What sources?
It can be anything from CNN to Fox News. So, the news source matters, and so you have to strategically read through the bias. I prefer an organization called Ground News, just because you can see the bias of the news article. But, when you have states that are showing miscounted ballots, that can be a cause of concern. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters because Joe Biden served the 4 years. He served as president. His executive orders went through. And so by all intents purposes, he was president and he won fair and square. Whether you agree with it or not, we will find out more information in the coming months as everything is audited.
I did mention that one audit that found 20 non-citizens registered in Georgia. Fulton County's ballots were counted 3 separate times. I guess the reason I ask this again and again is the president has made it a litmus test for his own, sort of a loyalty test for him. Mr. Wilson, what do you think? Who won in 2020? And was it a free and fair election, by and large?
Great question. What did the results show?
You're asking me?
Asking, obviously, we all know how the results are, right?
Sure. Most of us
Mr.
acknowledge
Biden
that.
won the election. He won the election.
Okay.
I don't find it as my job or even a hobby to dig into the details, plus or minus. I just look at results on the surface. On the surface, he won. Fine. 4 years later, Trump won. Fine. I remember Stacey Abrams. I remember she screamed to high heaven how the election was stolen from her. Year after year, she screamed that. It's not right. The elections are what they are. And I believe in free and fair elections. I believe U.S. citizens should be the ones that vote in federal elections. And I believe you should have voter ID. So I want us to move forward, make our elections free and fair, consistent, and documented so that we know what the results are, and then we move on. Because that's the beauty of America. The beauty of America is we could fight, we could argue, but we all agree that America is a great place to live. Our Constitution is the greatest Constitution on the earth. It's 250 years on the Declaration of Independence. Let's celebrate that. You can remember Abraham Lincoln. This is the land of Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was hated, vilified, etc., etc. The nation split, but he still became the greatest president the U.S. has ever had. So I agree with democracy and a Republican form of government. Let's take the results as they are and then move on.
What do you think about the president's decision to pardon everyone involved with the attack on the Capitol building on January 6th?
That's his decision. It is not mine to second guess it.
That's it. You have no opinion, good or bad, as a citizen, just as somebody in America?
I think we all listening here know that presidents make decisions that we may or may not agree with. And pardons is a long one. Even all the pardons that Clinton gave and all the pardons that Biden gave. Every president has that discretion. He's elected to use that discretion. How he uses it, that's his decision. It's not my role to second guess it. Even as a congressman, it's not my role to second guess it because that's not my swim lane. That's the swim lane of an executive. If you don't like that executive, vote for somebody else.
Would you support a law reining in the pardon power? There has been discussion of that. Or a constitutional amendment, perhaps. As you said, there have been bipartisan abuses.
Oh, there's bipartisan abuses at all 3 branches, whether it's legislative, judiciary, or the executive. And Article 1 is the legislative responsibility. That means that's the primary one, I would think. And we owe it to our citizens to have laws that are fair and reasonable, to manage the money, and to support our state. I would have to look at the details and fully understand it and could not make that decision on the surface without understanding that, which is part of the deliberative process as a congressman.
All right. Joshua Lloyd, what do you think about the president's decision to pardon everyone convicted of or charged with criminal wrongdoing in relation to the attack on the Capitol building on January 6th, 2021?
It's a very conflicting one, If you look at it from a perspective of, they did break the law. They actively engaged in entering a federal building without the proper permission, proper protocol. So by all means, they were breaking the law when they did it. At the same time, with the coverage on it, we had the BBC sued for doctoring videos of Trump saying to attack the Capitol. The initial portion of the speech was an hour before the later half of the speech, but they doctored it, they tied it together, and made it look like he was actively trying to encourage people to go to the Capitol, break in, and attack Congressman or Vice President Pence. Pence. Thank you. But ultimately, that is his decision. He has the FBI working under him, all the information sitting in front of him. So he does have that discretion. In terms of reining in that power from a legislative perspective, I don't necessarily think that would be wise. That is an executive action privileged to him. Whether it's Democrat, Republican, they all have that ability. They all have that power. And when it comes down to it, if Congress doesn't see a pardon as being wise, they can always come in and say, we're not going to allow that to happen. It's going to take quite a bit of votes, but they have the power to do that.
We're coming to the end of our time together. Maybe we can get philosophical here. And I'll start with you, Josh Lloyd. What do you see as the difference among being a Republican, being a conservative, and being with Trump right now in America? If there is, maybe there isn't a difference anymore.
There definitely is a difference. When we look at the government and its place within society, some conservatives want to have a more libertarian approach where absolutely no government, all laws are bad laws, just leave me alone and we can be friends. Then there's the other side of the Republican Party that are saying, we need to have the military and the protection systems in place and to encourage the free market capitalism that we are currently in right now. But with that, there's always abuses in both situations. And it's interesting seeing the different perspectives. There's an organization, I believe it's called isidewith.org. You can actually find out your political mapping, like how liberal you are versus how conservative you are. And it'll actually match you with various political figures on how close you relate to their policy or where they stand on, capitalistic society versus socialistic society, liberal versus conservative. And it's just a really neat situation to see which officials you actually correlate with, and if you had to, how you would vote.
Same question. Jeff Wilson, is there a difference? And what is it if so, or maybe there isn't, being Republican, being conservative, and being Trump, with Trump?
I think there's a great philosophical question. And you could look at both sides. Is the Democratic Party so extreme left that all they are is AOC and Mamdani? Or are there actually reasonable people in the Democratic Party? I think there are a few. The Republican Party started, 1856? Basically here in Illinois. Abraham Lincoln is the first Republican president. He became president because he wanted to stop the spread of slavery and ended up saving the Union and terminating slavery. The Democratic Party resisted that every time. You have the Civil Rights Act. The Democratic Party are the one that came up with the Jim Crow laws. So as far as the Republican Party, I think the Republican Party represents the mainstream of America. We want to live our lives free from government coercion, We want to have prosperity. We want to live in peace. And the Republican Party is a big tent. It has a lot of workers, labor union, all different colors, all different religions, all different aspirations to be an American. I support President Trump because America is first for him and it's first for me. America needs to be preeminent on the earth, and I support that. I'm not talking about means and methods. I'm looking at results. And right now we have the greatest economy that we've ever had. We have the greatest border security that we've ever had. So yeah, I support President Trump. And again, conservatism is following the Constitution as written, following the rule of law, and allowing liberty and justice for all. So I'm all those.
We are almost out of time here. On this point, though, you mentioned the Democratic Party, working with Democrats. I was thinking about this district before it was redrawn to be even more Democratic. It was a little more competitive. There was a congressman named Rodney Davis, Republican, held it for 10 years, held off all comers. Many people tried to unseat him. And when he started, he was ranked by a group out of Indiana called the Lugar Center pretty high on bipartisanship, working across the aisle. And he used to talk about that proudly. And as the years went on, and that became kind of more of a liability in politics, being seen working with the enemy, he stopped talking about that as much. So how will you, if elected, how will you think about your role as a member of Congress, right? Making compromises with your political opponents or holding fast to your ideology, principles, even if it just results in more gridlock?
Fantastic question. I have met Rodney and talked with him face to face. I think he's a wonderful man, and he did wonderful things for District 13. Bipartisanship is what makes America great. We can work together on so many things. Energy policy, tax, safety nets. There's reasonable approaches. There's red lines on both sides of the aisle. For me, my red line is what makes America great, safe, free. The Constitution of the United States. My role as your representative, and I expect to be elected, is to take your voice. There's 750,000 people in this 175-mile long, 2 to 24-mile wide district. All kinds of people. It's my job to represent you fairly, reasonably, listen to your voice, and work for the best interest of our district. And there are red lines, but there are also a lot of things that we could compromise on that redounds to the benefit of all the constituents that live in Illinois District 13 and even the state itself.
Joshua Lloyd, same question. What would you see your role as a member of Congress as, right? Working across the aisle or holding firm to your ideas even if it results in gridlock?
I'm pretty understanding, when you receive new information, it is not weakness to be able to come up with a new opinion. When you have information, new information, it can completely change the perspective of how you see a situation, a industry, an entire society, for that matter of fact. So when that occurs, I am willing to give the opposing idea a thought, a good discussion. I believe that having that discussion is what makes the United States great. There are nations that have dictators, and we see that never works out. There's a reason the United States has lasted as long as it has. Compromise. Sometimes Republicans are 100% correct. Sometimes Democrats are 100% correct. I hate to say that, but, it's true. But I'm very reasonable with creating opinions based on information. If something is factual, rather than social, I will be willing to give it more thought. With that said, there are a few situations where I will never cave. One of the big things that I carry in my life is my faith. If something is contrary to my faith and is trying to restrict it or go against it completely, I will never cave on that. But ultimately, information and facts are what matters, and that is where I will always make my opinion. Whether it's coming from a Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. I will join the table for a conversation.
All right. And with that, we have come to the end of our time. So we'll go now to closing statements and just reversing the order we began with. Jeff Wilson, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, NAACP, Legal and Voters, Illinois Public Media, for allowing us to speak and talk about what's great about America and for this Republican Candidate Forum. My name is Jeff Wilson. I'm a military veteran. I've served this country, and I actually serve right now in Champaign County on the county board as elected official. I've worked in the nuclear industry for many years in leadership positions. I'm qualified to take your voice to Washington, D.C. I would hope that you would choose me to represent you. We've talked about a lot this day. We've talked about immigration, the economy, philosophical statements. Immigration is a significant issue. We are actually in a border state, even though we're not on the border. Every state is a border state. Immigration needs to be handled in accordance with the law. Economy. We talked about economy. I have 8 kids, 11 grandkids. We want us to be successful and prosperous. We want less taxes, less regulation, more industry, more energy, more benefit to our farmers, our first responders. I believe in our Constitution. I will do everything it takes to defend it and protect it. And I'll do the right thing by you to represent you, to take your voice and advocate for Illinois in Congress for District 13. I ask for your support, and I ask for your vote and your prayers, and thank you for this opportunity, Brian, to speak.
Joshua Lloyd, 2 minutes.
First, I would like to thank you, Brian. I would also like to thank the League of Women Voters and the NAACP for hosting this event and bringing us together. And Jeff, even though he's my opponent, we have been very cordial. I don't have any negative comments toward my opponent. With that, I would really like to be your choice for the Republican nominee for the 13th Congressional District. I will bring a perspective for our economy. I'll help reduce that tax burden. The energy sector, education. These are sectors that are the breath, the blood, the brain of our country. And we need to get back to some of the basics that are fueling our nation to be successful, to helping our hard workers, everyday Americans, have a roof over their head, warm meal in front of them, and giving you the lifestyle and the family life that you want. With that, we have the education, we have economy, border security, we have crime and safety, thoughts that need more in-depth discussion on. And I'm willing to bring that discussion to the table and work on your behalf, whether you are a Republican, whether you are a Democrat, or anything in between. I will represent you, I will speak with you, and I will have a discussion. Once again, my name is Joshua Lloyd. I'm running for the Illinois 13th Congressional District. If you would like to learn more, please visit my website at lloydforcongress.com. That is LOYD forcongress.com.
And with that, our time is up. Thank you both for participating in the 13th Congressional District Candidate Forum, produced by Illinois Public Media in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Champaign County and the NAACP of Champaign County. This forum will air across the district on the 21st show, weekdays at 11 on NPR stations statewide, and on Illinois Public Media's YouTube channel, as well as the media platforms of the League of Women Voters and the NAACP. The primary election is on March 17th. Early voting is already happening now. Check your local listings. I'm Brian Mackey. Thanks for watching.